It's generally more work to refute a false claim than to perpetuate one, and by the time somebody's got around to figuring out why a claim is false, the audience may have already heard it and moved on to the next thing, because people don't always bother to verify a claim before believing it and then passing it along, whether that means telling people in person or hitting reblog, retweet, re-whatever. There's an old adage that says, a lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth can get its boots on. A related problem is how even after somebody investigates a false claim, the falsehood may linger on in people's minds because the correction doesn't get as many views as the initial reporting. 10 million people see the headline that such and such thing happened, but then only 2 million people see the headline of, oh wait, actually it didn't. The result is that misinformation is often sticky, or resistant to refutation. Back when Kyle Rittenhouse was on trial, misinformation, claims of an unclear origin that had already been demonstrated to be false months earlier, was still being repeated on television, including by acting politicians. If you watched the news around this time, you may have heard people repeating that he illegally brought a gun across state lines, even though by that point this was known to be false. A surprising number of people had never seen the footage of the shooting, even a year after the event, and with the trial ongoing on television, but still somehow managed to have very strong opinions about it. I spoke with a lot of people who thought that Rittenhouse had killed 3 black people, even though everybody he shot was white. I don't think they had ever seen the video footage of the shooting, even though it was available really early on. What was happening with that case? No matter what you feel about US gun law, and regardless of whether you think Rittenhouse was a well-intended person who had to defend himself or a reckless racist who was hoping that somebody would give him an excuse to kill, there was just something about that story that resulted in people having a difficult time keeping their facts straight. I'm not going to go over the whole Rittenhouse trial, but there's a number of other examples of sticky information that I want to put a spotlight on. Donald Trump and the very fine people. There is a story about Donald Trump that I considered misinformation from day one, at best a misunderstanding that nobody ever bothered to clear up, but which still lingers in the minds of people across the world years later, which is that he called a bunch of Nazis very fine people. Or rather, he said, there are very fine people on both sides, where one of the two sides in question were a bunch of Nazis. That's obviously not something you would want a president to say, so of course people are upset. But this has always seemed like a distortion of what he actually meant to say that day, which I don't think was actually unclear if you read it. When Trump said both sides that day, the two sides he's referring to were not normal people and Nazis. It was people who wanted to take down the statue of Robert E. Lee, and the people who opposed taking down the statue. That's what the protest and the event in general was about. There were people defending the statue who were not Nazis. Trump said there were some very bad people on the pro-statue side, such as the white supremacists, but that some of them were fine people who just opposed taking down the statue. Here's a relevant part of the transcript from the Politico, and the video footage is easy to find online if you want to listen to it instead. He said, "I've condemned many different groups, but not all of those people," meaning the crowd outside, "were neo-Nazis. Believe me, not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. Those people were also there because they wanted to protest the taking down of a statue of Robert E. Lee. This week, it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week?" Later on, a reporter says the neo-Nazis started this thing. They showed up in Charlottesville. Trump says you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. Meaning, in the pro-statue and anti-statue group, there were some very bad people, but there were also fine people on both sides. When he says very fine people here, he's literally excluding the Nazis. He's saying, yeah, sure, the Nazis are bad, but there were other people who were very fine people. So it's the opposite. I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group who were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. He then says, "I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists because they should be condemned totally, but you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white supremacists, and the press has treated them absolutely unfairly." A reporter then says, "Oh, do you mean that the press treated white nationalists unfairly?" And okay, I mean, that is technically ambiguous, but that's not what I would have assumed he meant. And then Trump says no, so... If you look at any of the news reporting of that day before the march at night with the tiki torches, it does seem like there was just a big crowd of normal people standing around. Can we say they were very fine people? Well, I don't know anything about them, but the least we can say is they aren't Nazis. And call it a broken clock, but Trump was right about people coming after statues of George Washington, and various other historical figures for that matter, many of them not clearly bad guys in the way that we view American Confederates. That's just where it started. We were going through some kind of weird historical figure purity spiral back then. It seems to have blown over by now, but that was the atmosphere at the time. The only way I can see somebody thinking that Trump called Nazis fine people is if they just read one sentence out of context and then never bothered looking into it. They heard that a Nazi rally happened, and then they see Trump on Charlottesville, very fine people on both sides, and then they think, oh, both sides. So he's saying the Nazis are fine people too, and then that's it. And then like what happened with the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, people just go on their way, and then like years later, they still remember their own misinterpretation of events. It just never gets corrected. But I also have to stop at this point and say, do you realize what's happening here? What am I doing? Why am I wasting my time trying to grant Trump some level of charitability? Like, does it accomplish anything? It does, only in that if you are dishonest when you attack him, that gives reason to his supporters to be, like, skeptical of criticism of him, which is bad. But even if you subtract all of this from the public record, it's not like anybody who hates Trump is going to do a 180 and decide they like Trump now because they realize that the very fine people quote was misunderstood. It feels like arguing about whether Hitler beat his wife or not. Like, the fact that he didn't call Nazis fine people does not matter when it's in the shadow of all the other terrible things that he's said. Nor does it even vindicate his response to this one event. Think about it, a literal neo-Nazi rally just happened in modern America. Why would your main concern be pointing out that some of the people who were on the same side as the Nazis on some local political issue aren't as bad as people might think? This was obviously a failure of his duty to condemn hatred and extremism in the country. Look at how other Republicans responded. Ted Cruz said, "The Nazis and Klansmen and white supremacists who gathered there, they're racists, they're bigots, they're idiots, they're spreading lies." Paul Ryan said, "We must be clear, white supremacy is repulsive, this bigotry is counter to all the country stands for, there can be no moral ambiguity." George W. Bush and his father signed a joint statement in which they said America must always reject racial bigotry, anti-Semitism, and hatred in all forms. These statements are more like how you would expect a politician to react. Let's imagine a mirrored scenario with the roles reversed. Imagine it's 2022 and there's a conflict in some American city. Let's say a city government plans on taking down something public that left-wing people like. And to match the controversy aspect, let's say it's a statue of somebody with a complicated past, like Harvey Milk or Huey P. Newton. Left-wingers show up in protest, right-wing counter-protesters also materialize, and then a bunch of communists and Antifa, the far left, they show up, and they win the day, culminating in a big ol' communist march where people with torches go around chanting, "Death to America, we hate capitalism, we hate Christianity, we're coming for your children." The next day, videos of masked figures with pictures of people like Joseph Stalin or Mao Zedong, and signs with slogans like "Liberals get the bullet too," with a hammer and sickle next to it, circulate on the news and flood social media. How do you think Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Nancy Pelosi, Gavin Newsom, Chuck Schumer, or any other major Democratic Party figure you can think of would respond to these events the next day? What would their focus be? What kind of language would they use? It feels insane to defend Donald Trump by pointing out that his stupid, irresponsible response wasn't quite as bad as people think. Because even the correct interpretation was bad. There are better people worth defending. Speaking of which, let's explore an example. No, Elizabeth Warren did not pretend to be a Native American. If a person has done hundreds of things wrong, and then you learn that one of those things was actually misreported or misunderstood and they were actually innocent, you can acknowledge that, but your overall opinion of them is likely not significantly changed because they've still done so many other things wrong. Well, unless the nature of that one revelation causes you to, doubt all of the other things, but supposing that's not the case. This is probably what will happen with somebody like Donald Trump, who, okay, sure, I can acknowledge was misunderstood in this one instance, but I still think he's a piece of shit for 100 other reasons, so overall, we're not moving the needle very much. But sometimes just one or two negative stories can indeed dominate the public image of a certain person, meaning if that one story were refuted, your opinion about them could significantly change. Elizabeth Warren has been a U.S. Senator from Massachusetts since 2013 and gained significant publicity with her 2020 bid for the Democratic Party presidential nomination. In terms of her opinions and values, she is somebody who many Americans find disagreeable because she is especially left-leaning, but in terms of her conduct and character has always been a respectable and honest person. Despite this, there are many people whose knowledge and impression of her consists mostly of the following story. She claimed to be Native American, Trump called her out on it publicly, she took a DNA test that confirmed she was lying and was actually only like 0.1% Native or something, and then she had to issue an apology to the actual Native Americans. Wow, how embarrassing. But actually, every aspect of this story is wrong. Warren herself, probably on advice from people on her team, just tries to move on and not really talk about this whole controversy. Probably because it's too much effort to refute and she feels like people are likely not going to listen. The story begins in 2012, during her first Senate race. Her opponent in the race speculated that she pretended to have Native ancestry to get an advantage professionally. Before getting into politics, Warren taught law at several US universities. Though it was baseless, the claim was investigated and taken seriously. Warren's old employers were contacted, old documents were requested. It ended up being reported that Warren did write American Indian on a form at some point decades earlier, but it didn't seem to confer any advantage in her schooling or work. It was just an optional write-in for data collection inside of an organization, like a census, not a job application or resume or something. The Boston Globe also investigated the matter and reported that, in documents and interviews, there was not only no evidence of anybody ever thinking of Warren as a Native American, but clear counter-evidence indicating that Warren was always explicitly viewed and considered as a white woman by those who hired her. I wasn't able to find the original text, but apparently Warren also contributed to a local cookbook in 1984 called Pow Wow Chow, which was meant to feature indigenous-themed recipes, and she's billed as Elizabeth Warren, Cherokee. Did she just say that her family had Cherokee ancestry, so she figured that any old family recipe of hers was basically a Cherokee recipe? Supposedly, she contributed recipes for sugar cake and peach cobbler, and the book was made by a cousin of hers back in Oklahoma where Warren was born. Publications like the Daily Mail ran articles just about this cookbook, claiming that Warren's recipes weren't proper Cherokee dishes, or that they weren't really generational family recipes at all. She probably just copied them from a newspaper. And hey, maybe she did, I don't know. Maybe she thought it was just a cookbook and nobody would really care or look that much into it. Or maybe these newspaper people are wrong and these actually are recipes that Warren's grandmother taught her, and her grandmother told her that, oh, I learned these recipes from a Cherokee guy, so Warren thought that they counted as Cherokee recipes. I mean, there's barely any info to go off of here, so I don't know. But I also don't really care. I mean, this is like laughably unimportant. Wouldn't it be nice if people paid this much attention to every random thing a Republican politician lied about? Why was so much attention given to this of all things? It wasn't even like Warren brought it up on the campaign trail. It's not like she got on stage and said, hey, elect me and I'll be the first Native American senator or something. It was never a part of her public persona. Nobody knew or cared about this supposed Cherokee connection until her opponent brought it up, and yet somehow it's been a defining part of her public image ever since. It's one of the worst cases I know of an undeservedly bad reputation. Trump eventually got wind of this and started adding to the dishonest telling of events, because of course he did. Warren pretends to be a Native American, he says, but she's not really, so let's all sarcastically call her Pocahontas. There's not really a joke there, but whatever. Trump then brought up the notion of her getting a DNA test, claiming that he would pay $1 million to a charity of her choice if she got a test result that says she's Indian. And to everyone's surprise, Warren did just that, and asked Trump to give the money to the American Indigenous Women's Resource Center. He didn't, because of course he didn't. Now let's take a step back and ask, what did Warren actually claim about herself? For one, it wasn't that she's genetically Native, nor did she claim to have tribal citizenship, or call herself a member of an Indian tribe. The only thing she ever really said was that she remembers while growing up that she and her brothers were told their family had Native ancestry, and that this connection was part of their story as a result. What does that mean? For some people it's obvious, but for others maybe not. We all have 4 grandparents, but it's normal for our grandparents to have very different levels of influence on our lives. Often one pair of grandparents will be far more influential than the other pair. In some cases, one particular grandparent stands out. I have a friend who's half Japanese, on his father's side. His father's mom died when he was very young, and his mother's parents weren't around very much, so he's genetically only a quarter Japanese, But being Japanese is a big part of how he views himself, because he grew up in a household with an internal culture largely influenced by Japanese media and the Japanese language. He grew up speaking the language, and he had the regular presence of his Japanese grandfather and his half-Japanese father, who looked pretty Japanese and was generally by other Americans just treated as a Japanese guy. Would this person be lying if he said that he's Japanese? What if he just said that he's part Japanese? What if he said that he has Japanese heritage or Japanese ancestry? The point is that when you're talking about identity, culture, upbringing, and narrative, things are a lot hazier than being either this or that. It's entirely plausible in this understanding that Warren had some older relative, let's say a great-grandfather, who considered himself to be a Native American, and who other people in society considered a Native American, and it's possible this person had a significant influence on the family at some point. That might not appear significantly on a DNA test, but could still influence the family's view of itself and their identity and story. And this would be more in line with how Warren has always talked about it. Very committed to investigating this story, reporters called Warren's extended family back in 2012 to ask about their memory of the matter. Her second cousin, meaning a grandchild of her grandparents' sibling, Ina Mapes. Ina Mapes, 77 years old, who said it was her father who had Native American roots and that his father agreed he was 1/4 tribal blood, as she worded it. Warren's siblings came forward issuing a statement in her defense, saying, "We grew up listening to our mother and grandmother and other relatives talk about our family's Cherokee and Delaware heritage." Oklahoma is one of the U.S. states with the highest percentage of people who claim to have Native American ancestry, and experts think the number could be far higher than reported due to widespread intermixing, because somebody who's half Indian genetically is still a person with Indian ancestry, so the more intermixing that happens, the more people who can technically say they have Indian ancestry, and because of historical racism against Indians that caused some of them who had light enough skin to pass as white, or just enough to convince a U.S. census taker that they were, to just go ahead and pretend that they were white and then try to cover up the fact they had Native ancestry. These factors could cause disagreement as to whether somebody was really Indian or not, because a person could try and hide it, and then other people in their life down the road might have conflicting memories about, hey, wait a minute, was that guy Indian or wasn't he? Well, I remember him saying that he was once. Oh, well, I remember him denying it. The geneticist who did the test with Warren confirmed that she was mostly of European DNA, but with signs of an unadmixed, meaning non-part European, Indian ancestor 6 to 10 generations ago. That sounds like a wide range, because it is. DNA tests are pretty imprecise. There was also some question about the validity of the test because the database used mostly Native American DNA from Central and South America with a lack of samples from North American tribes, meaning the actual presence of native DNA in Warren's could have been higher if they had more accurate samples to compare it with. However, most people are not interested in this level of detail. They just saw 6 to 10 generations ago and ran with that, claiming her test result confirmed she was 1/64th to 1/1024th Indian. That's something from 1.5 to 0.1%. At most, an amount still so trivial that claiming to be Native American would be taken by the public as tantamount to a falsehood, which is how a lot of people think the story ended. The problem with this whole conversation is that tribal identity isn't genetic. That's what Warren actually apologized for, not for claiming to be Native, but for talking about Native identity as though it's a genetic phenomenon, and as though being Indian is a question of your DNA in the first place. Chuck Hoskin Jr., then Secretary of the Cherokee Nation, made public statements indicating his displeasure not with Warren claiming to be Indian, but with how the topic was being framed in the media. In the mainstream of white America, being Native American is talked about like a race, like being black, but that's not how Native Americans view it, and that's not how they want us to view it either. Imagine it's the 17th century and a member of an Indian tribe is children with a European. In the Indians' view, these children are not half Indians. They're not half members of the tribe. They grow up among them, they live as one of them, they identify as one of them, they are one of them. A good comparison is that you wouldn't use DNA to determine whether somebody is an American citizen. It fundamentally couldn't determine that, and for somebody to take a DNA test for that reason implies something wrong about what it means to be an American. You could even imagine some people getting a bit upset about it. Elizabeth Warren understands this, and she realized the act of releasing a DNA test, albeit one that people had demanded, helped cause further confusion about the concept of tribal citizenship. That was why she apologized and tried to clarify to the press that she's not a member of any tribe, something she never actually claimed, but she realized people were kind of mistaking her to have claimed. That apology played all over the internet, and people misinterpreted that she was essentially admitting she was factually wrong to ever claim she had Native ancestry in the first place. Even though she wasn't wrong, and that's not what the apology was for. Warren apologized because she has a conscience and actually cares about this issue, and she still is on the whole viewed positively by the American Indian population. After this whole ordeal, Deb Haaland, endorsed Warren for president and called her a great partner for Indian country. Let's restate a few things in conclusion. Elizabeth Warren didn't claim to have Native ancestry to advance her career in law or in politics. Nor did she lie about having Native ancestry, except maybe exaggerating it for a cookbook in the 1980s that she probably didn't think any of us would ever read. The public statements she made about her ancestry since getting into politics have all turned out to be true, and the DNA test she took didn't disprove her story, it confirmed it. I think we should also acknowledge that Warren's opponents had to focus on this bullshit smear because they had nothing else on her. She had no other obvious weaknesses or controversies beyond actual policy disagreements, and God forbid anyone actually talk about policy and politics. That won't work. What other criticism can you recall anybody making of Warren ever? They found this one thing, and they latched onto it as hard as they could, repeating it over and over until it dominated the conversation. The right-wing media played into it, the Republican president played into it. Warren could not get away. But Elizabeth Warren is not the woman in American politics who's been most unfairly defamed over the years. That title has to go to one Hillary Rodham Clinton, First Lady of the U.S., Senator from New York, Secretary of State, and Democratic Party nominee for the 2016 presidential election. Hillary Clinton and her damn emails. The story, as many people now remember it, is that some number of years ago, Hillary Clinton was subpoenaed for some reason about something about handling classified info, maybe, and then she responded by deleting all of her emails off her private email server, which she wasn't even supposed to have in the first place. The nerve! And who knows how many crimes she hid by doing so. I can't think of any other story that has been so overblown politically. The Republican Party brought this up as often as they could. In the Trump cinematic universe, "But what about Hillary's email server?" became a magical phrase, a magical sentiment, a carte blanche for them to engage in any corruption and criminality they wanted, because who cares? Hillary did it too. Hillary did it first. Are we doing bad stuff? Well, Hillary did bad stuff. The most powerful force in politics in recent decades is disillusionment. Not convincing us the bad guys are great, but convincing us the good guys aren't so great. If everyone is bad, then what difference does it make? If all the politicians do crime, and they all sin, and we're all terrible, then what's the difference? Why lift a finger to fight evil if the heroes are evil too? This is the effect that's helped to normalize the latest incarnation of the Republican Party, and Hillary Clinton was a centerpiece of that strategy in its early form. Okay, so what's true? Hillary Clinton and her team did use a private email server. This is not good. Clinton and her team then mishandled classified documents via email, meaning they sent material by email that was then stored on a server that it shouldn't have been, or it was available to somebody who wasn't authorized to see it. Now, is this a problem? Yes, of course. But it's also a rather broad problem, not only with Clinton, but with seemingly all top-level American executives. The Trump administration had similar issues, and then the Biden administration had similar issues, and then now the Trump administration, it's got even worse since then with the whole Signal thing. But yeah, the point is that high-level American executive people are not very good at fucking security. Even the FBI director that investigated Clinton has made similar mistakes as the one that Clinton was investigated for. The reality is a lot of these older people in government all prefer to use their own devices and not bother thinking about security, which is why the FBI has to make these rules and then go around trying to make all these people follow the rules. It only became a huge story of national spotlight when Clinton was the one being targeted, because suddenly this became a really serious thing that we all care about, and then afterwards they went back to not really caring about it that much. In 2016, the FBI director stated there was no evidence to suggest that Clinton had deliberately done anything wrong, and that no reasonable prosecutor would bring criminal charges against her if she cooperated. That's usually how cases like this play out. It's resistance to enforcement of these rules that gets you into serious trouble, not making a mistake but then cooperating and allowing it to be corrected when somebody contacts your office about it. In 2022, when the FBI launched an investigation into Trump for his mishandling of classified info, the issue there was that he actively disobeyed and fought with the FBI for a year trying to hide the documents that he knew he had, and he instructed his lawyers to lie to investigators. Nothing like this happened in Clinton's case, nor did anything like that happen in Joe Biden's similar classified documents case the following year. In February, Clinton publicly argued she didn't send anything that was classified, but admitted that things may have been classified retroactively. If I email you a document and then that document is declared classified the next day, who's coming to your house and marking it as classified on your email server, or deleting it from your server if you no longer have a right to view it? This might be why you're just not supposed to email things like this. In July, after the FBI had looked into this more, they revealed that Clinton's defense was partially true. Thousands of emails containing classified info were classified after they were sent. But hundreds more contained info that was classified at time of sending, some of it explicitly labeled as such and some not. It's possible that Clinton or members of her team didn't realize they were sending things that were classified and that the used was unclear. That is when the FBI director said there was no evidence of wrongdoing and that no reasonable prosecutor would charge Clinton with anything. But that wasn't the end of it, because then once again, in October 2016, the FBI notified Congress it had found more emails and it was reopening their investigation, looking into the matter once more. This ultimately turned up nothing, but the announcement, less than 2 weeks before an election, couldn't have been less talked about. This controversy about Hillary Clinton's email server received more media coverage than any other topic or issue throughout the whole year-long election season. As a reminder, the man that she was running against was on record saying that climate change was a hoax invented by China. But yeah, this email server was the thing that got more attention than anything else. Now, what about her deleting all her emails after they were subpoenaed? That was also a big talking point. They said she bleached her servers or something. Well, if you can believe it, that was always a lie. There was no evidence for it, they knew there was no evidence for it, but they just kept saying it anyway, just kept repeating it, and millions of people ended up believing it was true. It's normal procedure for large organizations to delete emails every so often, and to destroy electronic devices every so often. If the police try to find your emails for something and then it turns out you deleted them, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. There would need to be evidence the emails were deleted after the fact in response to the subpoena to avoid being found. Then you might have something. But that's not what happened here. For their email server, Clinton and her team used servers provided by some networking company. The servers had been configured to automatically delete emails every so often. In 2014, somebody who worked for Clinton requested to shorten the retention period to a few months in order to effectively clear out a bunch of personal emails they no longer needed. But the technician at the company, for some reason, just didn't bother. I guess he forgot. The following year, a House committee issued a subpoena, and somebody who worked for Clinton contacted that company to request any emails that were still on the server. And the employee, as soon as he was contacted, realized he forgot to make a change that they had requested months earlier. So he then instantly deleted all of the emails that were supposed to have been deleted the year before. Despite many other emails being recovered, and despite Clinton herself having no connection to this deletion, her Republican opponent got up on stage and claimed that Clinton deleted all of her emails after a subpoena to hide the evidence, and right-wing voices across the country echoed this claim ad nauseum. By late October, when the FBI director said that he was reopening the investigation, the public was primed to interpret this as confirmation of everything the Republicans had been alleging, even though it was not. It was openly suggested the mere fact that Clinton was under investigation at all was strong reason to not elect her president. Doesn't that seem so quaint, in hindsight? Hillary Clinton, at worst, accidentally mishandled some classified documents, and she isn't supposed to be using a private email server at all, according to rules about that sort of thing for government officials, and she probably should have known better, but this is one of those things that everybody does wrong. Not that this excuses her, but it makes the focus placed on her in particular unjustified. Everything else you've heard about the email server scandal beyond this has just been misinformation. Wait a minute, what about Benghazi? Yeah, why was Hillary Clinton even being subpoenaed to begin with? It had something to do with Benghazi, a city in Libya. The US had facilities there, and in 2012, an Islamic militant group attacked on September 11th, yes, deliberately because of 9/11, which led to 4 Americans dying, including the US ambassador to Libya. There were various congressional committees that investigated the matter, and none were able to produce anything of substance to charge either Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton with any kind of improper behavior. Obama and Clinton both acted properly while being investigated, including Clinton giving testimony before a committee under oath 3 separate times. The third one lasted for 11 hours. After the hearing, the Republican in charge told the press they hadn't uncovered anything noteworthy. An enormous amount of time and energy was poured into trying to get Clinton on something, anything, and it all failed. No wrongdoing was ever demonstrated. Whose fault was the attack? I don't know, but neither do the people who want you to think that it was all Hillary Clinton's fault. This whole thing was all for show. Hillary became a lightning rod for right-wing dissatisfaction with the establishment. The angle of attack was that she had been in politics for so long and served in so many different positions, being the wife of a US president, then being a senator, then working as Secretary of State, always so close to power, that she just must be corrupt, and is therefore to blame for the present state of the country. They held these hearings about Benghazi over and over again because they wanted to create the illusion that she must have done something wrong pertaining to Benghazi, despite all of their investigations and hearings amounting to nothing. It was kind of just an act of propaganda, investigating somebody just to make it seem as though they are the kind of person that needs to be investigated. By today, baseless conspiracy theories have become an essential part of right-wing politics. Back in 2016, it was only the beginning, and much of it was beginning around Hillary Clinton. In addition to all the lies about her email server, and the irresponsibility of the media and the FBI to not mislead the public about that story, another major point that affected her campaign was an organization called WikiLeaks facilitating Russian hackers targeting John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, and releasing his emails to the public. It was later revealed the Trump campaign was in direct contact with both WikiLeaks and with Russian operatives. This affair is what led to conspiracy theories online about Democratic Party leaders engaging in satanic rituals and pedophilia, theories which WikiLeaks itself helped to promote, including the infamous Pizzagate conspiracy theory, in which it was alleged that pizza was being used as a coded message among these emails to hide a human trafficking child sex ring. During this time, people on the internet were calling her Killary and fantasizing about her assassinating all of her political opponents, or people who were involved in the leaks. If you watch the debates between Trump and Hillary Clinton today, girl, this woman was right about everything. This has to be the most unduly hated person in America. While we're on the topic of women who have an undeservedly negative reputation, well, actually, I only mentioned 2, but 3's a crowd. Let's give an honorable mention to Marie Antoinette, who is now most remembered as the speaker of a fabricated quote. When she was told the poor could not afford bread, she replied, "Then let them eat cake." The idea being that when she was out of bread, she simply ate something else instead, so why don't they? An Austrian princess, Marie Antoinette was born Maria Antonia, but chose to use the French version of her name after being married off at age 14 to Louis Auguste, who was not yet King of France, but heir apparent under the reigning Louis XV, who died a mere 4 years later. Louis ascended to the throne as Louis XVI, and Marie Antoinette was suddenly Queen of France, a powerful monarch right at the age that girls today are finishing high school. The fact that Marie Antoinette was from Austria was used against her throughout her life, as the two countries were, during this period, not on the best of terms. Many years later, as Marie Antoinette is into her 30s, the revolutionaries wanted to stoke anger in France to incite the public to revolt. For them, Marie Antoinette had become a symbol of everything they believed was wrong with France. In addition to making up this quote intended to portray her as so clueless and privileged as to be completely out of touch with the reality faced by most common people, they also claimed she had illegitimate children, told stories about her stealing from the palace, and blamed the country's general financial difficulties on her lavish personal spending. Like other French noblewomen, she had some rather expensive things. The "let them eat cake" attribution doesn't even make sense, for we know rather well that Marie was not ignorant of the conditions of the poor, nor the relative value of bread and cake. It was a cartoonish exaggeration even back then. Though she wasn't without any political agency, and she did take some action designed to help preserve the monarchy, as one should probably expect from a noblewoman who has known no other life other than the one she was given to as a child, Marie Antoinette was essentially an innocent woman. Marie Antoinette was basically an innocent woman, a victim of circumstance, a scapegoat. She died at age 37, murdered in public by decapitation after being accused of all sorts of random things. Her last recorded words are said to have been, "Pardon me, sir, I did not do it on purpose," after stepping on the executioner's shoe. Which is something I'm way more willing to believe that she actually said than "let them eat cake." Partially because I don't know why the revolutionaries would make this part up. It's way more in character for a woman who was, as much as she was, a paragon of high society. So what am I saying here? That Hillary Clinton is like the modern Marie Antoinette? Yeah, maybe that is what I'm saying. I don't know.